Well, we just passed the 6 month mark until November elections roll around, and with Donald Trump spending a lot of his time in a New York courtroom and President Biden holding China to stronger tariffs, and he's continuing to campaign. We are in full campaign mode, certainly. And joining me to talk about kind of where are we standing in terms of the campaign 6 months away from Election Day, Nathan Gonzales. Of course, you know him from Inside Elections. Nathan, welcome back to the DC Debrief. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we're having elections this year, John. I don't know whether we want to or not. They're coming, so we
Yeah,
better talk about them.
And I don't know if it's because Trump and the legal issues are factoring into this, and so he's not on the campaign trail like he normally would be. And we know President Biden, with the pandemic in 2020, he didn't have to and couldn't hit the campaign trail very hard. But we're not this, and maybe it's because of the two candidates themselves. Maybe we feel like we know them both so well right now. But it doesn't really feel like a typical presidential campaign to me. And I can't put my finger on exactly why that is, but it's lacking a lot of I don't know, a lot of the pomp or the excitement of a normal presidential campaign. Am I crazy in thinking that way?
Well, I think you ran right past one of the key differences in that it feels different because we have a former president and current candidate on trial during the middle
Yeah,
of this, right? I
true.
mean, that is just something we haven't seen, and that's why, as we talk about who's leading or who has the advantage or more likely to win, anybody who tells you, I do it with a level of caution, because anybody who tells you they know exactly how a race turns out when you have a candidate in this legal position is really not being genuine. I think about the sort of the volatility of this campaign. But but just because this is a rematch doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a replay, right?
Yeah.
In 2020, Biden defeated an unpopular incumbent president of the United States. In 2024, Biden is the unpopular incumbent president of the United States, and so it looks the same, but it's also different at the same time.
Yeah, we've never really had anything like this. I don't think, where you have you have a former president who was defeated by the current president, who could defeat the current president and become president again. It's just it is very, very unusual. And as you mentioned, I buried the lead a little bit there with the fact that Donald Trump is on trial in New York in this hush money case. He also has these three other trials that it doesn't appear are going to get started in time for a resolution to occur before Election Day. It's possible one of those things could get off the ground and get started maybe by the time Election Day rolls around, but there's even a lot of doubt about that. But taking a look at this New York case, without getting into the nitty gritty and the details of it, because, I think there's a lot of Americans here that don't really feel like this has anything to do with the election. If you look at the numbers, the polling data that has come down the pike over the last month, 2 months, Nathan, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of change in terms of support for President Trump, generally, broadly speaking. Why do you think that is?
I think public opinion has largely solidified around both Trump and Biden, right? People have made up their mind about whether they like them or don't like them, approve or disapprove of them, think of them favorably or unfavorably, and to put it in polling terms. And so we're talking more about the margins, about news events impacting the margins. And when the my default position is that we have a close race because we have an evenly divided country, then the margins start to matter. In With the legal case, with this New York case, what I'm watching, I've been telling groups for months, like, Trump's not going to be running from jail, right? That
Right.
let's say there's a conviction, there's going to be an appeal. Then I started to waver on that projection a little bit because Trump consistently violated the gag orders, or violated, the restrictions of him going after witnesses and going after, well, jurors. It hasn't happened, but then the judge threatening maybe short term jail for
Yeah.
that, then I started to waver a little bit. But what this has done, I think it's maybe helped Trump in one way and maybe hurt him in another way. I think it potentially hurts him in that this keeps the focus on Trump at a time when I believe voters in the middle want to know who is going to help them with the issues that they're facing, right? They don't want someone who's going to be focused on other things, and maybe that's legal or whatnot. I think maybe it has helped Trump in that it's made people so desensitized to alleged things that he has done wrong, or the things
Mhm.
he's done allegedly wrong, that there's just so much out there that people have started to just, it's normal. And so they've almost it's almost baked in that
Mhm.
he's on trial, when it is very abnormal for a candidate to be on trial in this in our system. So it's it's a complicated, to say it's complicated is probably the understatement of this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And as some of the polling that came out earlier in the week that lots of folks were talking about, it was a New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, Siena College poll that were focusing in on 6 battleground states, right? We're talking about
Mhm.
Nevada, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And taking a look at some of the numbers of registered voters, it does appear as though Donald Trump is in a really strong position in all of these different states. Can you assess what that polling is telling you as you're covering this?
Yeah, I think if the election were held today, I think Trump wins, and this polling backs that up. Just to walk through the math a little bit, it looks like Trump is doing better in sort of the Sun Belt and South. So Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, he's doing better. So that means if Trump wins those states, then Biden has to win what we've been calling the blue wall. He has to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And right now he's behind in those. He's a little close. Biden is a little closer to Trump in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, but those are must wins. If Biden wins everything that he's kind of favored to win, as well as Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that gets him to 270. That is
Mm,
precisely the number that you need
yeah.
to get elected. It's not one more, not one less. And
Hmm.
so it's right there on the edge. I a thing to watch is probably the watch the Democratic base. I think the Democratic base has been slower in coming behind Biden uh, compared to last year's, and maybe they don't come back at all at the same margins. We're talking about younger voters, some erosion among Hispanic voters and African American voters, and then also with third party candidates. And
Hmm.
I, we'll probably end up talking about,
Yeah.
but I think that RFK Jr. is probably at his peak
Hmm.
now, and there will be a slow decline in his support from now until election day, and we'll see how that plays out, because it's not necessarily that that's going to help Biden, though.
Well, let's talk about RFK Jr. Because it does appear as though he is not an insignificant factor in these swing state polls, polling somewhere, around 8 to 13, 14% in these different states. And based on the people who responded to these polls, the type of people who are showing support for RFK Jr., it seems to me that a lot of those people are younger people, Latinos who would probably go over to President Biden's side if RFK Jr. wasn't in the mix. And I think up until now, it's been kind of the idea that he was kind of siphoning off about the same amount of supporters from both Trump and Biden, or people who would consider voting for one or both of those guys. That it was not really having a big effect in terms of who was getting hurt more. But the way the numbers are shaking out right now, especially in the battleground states, I wonder if the Biden campaign should be more concerned about RFK Jr. than the Trump campaign. What do you think?
Well, one of the things I watch, how are the parties reacting to RFK Jr.? And
Mm.
right now, both sides are reacting as if he could be a threat to them. Right? They're either going after him and highlighting various parts of his record, or Democrats trying to see if RFK Jr. is going to does he meet the qualifications to make the ballot in every state. But both parties are acting a little bit scared. But when you look at those swing state polls, and Trump leading, it's not that Trump is, you know, at 55%, that he's just crushing it. It's just that Biden's number is so depressed. And so I tend to think I'm closer to agreement with what you're saying, that there
Mm.
are some of these RFK third party voters who would eventually go toward Biden when they see that, okay, really this is a binary choice between two people. Uh, but I know some people are going to think I'm crazy because RFK Jr. might be pulling at 10% from now until September. But these things, third party can't. Again, when you
Hmm.
look at other races, I'm thinking specifically about the Oregon governor's race
Yeah.
from 2022, where there was a legitimate third party candidate. And just as we got closer to election day, her support came down. It ended up allowing the Democrat to win a win the race there.
Yeah. And I will say, too, and we have to take this polling with a grain of salt because it is a snapshot in time. I saw somebody tweet out, and I forget who it was, but it was a reporter for NBC or something that tweeted out a screenshot of a poll that was done by Politico at this point during the Romney-Obama presidential campaign, where Romney had a 4-point lead on Obama at that point. So
Sure.
again, it's not necessarily projecting what's going to happen, but it is a good indication of where things stand right now, Nathan. And
Yeah,
we,
and I could add, John, that
yeah,
because that's a good point. What I would say though is that it fits with either other polling data or just the general trajectory of the race, right?
mhm,
Let's say that the New York Times Siena had come out with, 7 battleground polls and Biden was up by 10 in all of them.
mhm,
I would have been very suspicious. Like
yeah,
that's not actually, because that doesn't meet with all of the other either qualitative or quantitative pieces of the race.
right.
But the ones that showing, that had Trump ahead may have been a little rosy for Trump, but I think that fits the general state of the current race.
So it seems as though, as we've been looking at this data, that President Biden is having trouble with minority voters. He's not carrying the same number of minority vote, or at least a larger share of the minority vote seems to be willing to move over to Donald Trump or RFK Jr. And again, maybe as these protest votes or these protest, Nikki Haley is still drawing 20, 25% in some of these primaries in which she's no longer running. That's clearly, I think, seen as a protest vote against Donald Trump. But does that mean these folks who are not voting for or saying that they support President Biden right now, and likewise with Donald Trump, is that all just kind of posturing, or is that a lot of it posturing right now, 6 months out? But when push comes to shove, as you get closer to the general election in November, and you have to make a choice between Donald Trump or President Biden, it seems to me, I think the Biden campaign believes that the chickens will come home to roost, and that things will go back and start to filter back in terms of the minority vote the way that it historically has, and the way it did for President Biden in 2020.
Yes, at the end of the day, 90% or more of Democratic voters are going to vote for Biden and 90% or more of Republican voters are going to vote for Trump, because that's how it has worked in cycles in the past. And so that is my expectation. That is my expectation moving forward. Uh, Biden, though, and the confidence that that is how the race is going to play out, and how they're going to get, that Biden's going to get over the top. I understand it. It's plausible, but yet every day that doesn't happen, we get closer to election day.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we're in this. We I understand what Democrats are saying, but we're just in this. We keep creep. We're creeping closer and closer. So um, it's tough. Biden is in a difficult spot, that he is being held responsible for any multiple of challenges that the country is facing. I think voters are looking more fondly about Trump's time in
Hmm.
office than maybe what it really was, and he's benefiting from some positive
Hmm.
positive memories that people have.
Yeah.
It is funny to me, Joe, when you say, well, Trump will say, well, you're better off than you're now 4 years ago. Like, does anybody
Remember
remember
the
where we
pandemic?
were 4 years ago?
Yeah.
This was not, no
Yeah.
one was having fun. No,
Yeah.
it was a pretty, I think, it was not great, but yet voters don't blame Trump or his handling. Don't blame COVID-19 on Trump or his handling of it. He's being not held responsible at all for it, and so that has given him a lot of grace moving into a campaign against Biden, who is facing
Mhm.
a lot of challenges that he is being held responsible for, whether they're his fault or not.
And I wonder if everything else was the same, right? The same problems, the same economic numbers, the same wars going on everywhere else. If Joe Biden were 10 years younger, would his numbers look the way they do right now? Because it seems to me there's enough that there enough an independent voter could look at Joe Biden's record and see some accomplishments, and see a larger swath of what the economy is doing, and say it hasn't been bad. Certainly, conservatives and Republicans are going to look at it and say it's been bad, and there's no doubt about the fact that prices drive the sentiment on how the economy is actually doing, because that's how you and I relate to the economy? How much does it cost to get stuff at the grocery store? My goodness, McDonald's costs so much more now than it used to. Yeah, that's how we interact with the economy. But I wonder if Joe Biden's age, people say that these other things are important factors, inflation, all this other kind of stuff. But Biden's age, how big a factor do you think that is in his numbers right now?
It's big. I haven't heard the situation described that way or asked that way about if he was 10 years younger. I think there would be a difference. I think he'd
Hmm.
be doing better. I particularly then he would be the younger candidate. Trump
Hmm.
is 77, 77 and some change.
Yeah.
So he would be the contrast would be flipped. And so
Yeah.
age is a factor, and age is one of the things that Democrats can do the least about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That they and now there's a conversation, the current conversation about the debates, which I actually think that there will be one debate. That's where I'm putting down my money on one debate, because I believe Trump he wants that contrast. He wants to
Hmm.
show that he can take it to Biden and he's more vibrant and has the energy. At the same time, in hearing Trump talk about debates and hearing Republicans, they have lowered the bar so much for Biden that I
Hmm.
think if Biden shows up, stands behind a podium for 90 minutes, like he's going to get,
Yeah.
he's going to sail over that bar. And so Republicans might be careful what you wish for, right?
Right.
Because that's what happened in the State of the Union, John,
Hmm.
that
Right.
Biden, the bar was so low and people were like, oh, he stayed awake for 90. It was like, guys, I mean, unless you are really down a hole of where you think Biden is, like mentally, like, of course he was going to do fine. Of course he was going to do fine in that situation. I think in a debate, Biden will be able to hold his own, but
Yeah.
now it's just posturing. I think there's going to be one. Let's put it
Okay.
down on the record. I think there's going to be one.
Right, and without the presidential debate commission getting involved here, it doesn't seem as though they're going to be a part of this. It seems like the candidates are kind of going to make their own rules. Is that how we should be thinking about this right now?
Yeah, I mean, the actually, I think part of the official RNC platform now is that the nominee can't participate in official commission
Yeah.
debates because they're just so skeptical of the rules and the process and the people involved. So there is a level of skepticism in here that
Hmm.
they can both agree, the two teams that beyond the saber rattling, they will be able to agree on the rules, the moderators, the is there going to be a live audience or
Hmm.
not? What's the location? There's a lot of things to be worked out,
Yep.
and we don't agree on much in this country, John. Let alone very specific pieces of maybe the only presidential debate of the 2024
Right.
cycle.
What color M&Ms are they going to be in the green room
Yeah.
for it's totally you got to negotiate these things
How
down.
many Big Macs are going to be there? It's going to
Exactly.
be quarter
Exactly.
pounders.
These
It's
are
going to be a
important
lot.
issues, Nathan. You're making light, but these are important issues to our country. A couple more quick things, real quick. Saw reporting in Politico and New York Magazine that it looks like the Democratic National Convention could be a hybrid convention, much like it was in 2020. It's possible that we're not going to see these arenas filled with people, and every speech is going to be at the convention site. That we're going to kind of see just maybe the main speakers. Maybe on even just the last day, but it's going to be mostly through video and teleconferencing and all that kind of stuff. And it's generally, I think, seen as a way to avoid having protests interrupt the convention, much like in 1968 in Chicago. This, of course, being held in Chicago as well. What do you make of the idea that the convention could be a mostly or partly hybrid convention? Do you think that helps the president, hurts the president, hurts or helps the DNC brand?
Well, at first, I'm looking in my own self interest that I have a very expensive Airbnb that I would like to know if I need all the nights for,
Right. Yeah.
because for to take everyone behind the scenes, the parties take control of the hotel rooms at whatever the convention site is, and then just jack up the prices and deliver them to various state delegations and the media and stuff. But I this isn't a complete surprise. Does it help or hurt the president? I mean, I guess fewer protests or fewer distractions from the message that the Democratic Party wants to put out, the better.
Hmm.
I will say that are almost always a part of these conventions
Yeah.
because they have such a high profile. I've been in multiple arenas, and there's protesters, they're unfurling a banner,
Yeah.
during one of the speeches. So that stuff is not, it wouldn't be new. Now, the intensity that we're seeing right now, or just saw on college campuses and stuff, is next level. And if that is the case heading into August, the August convention in Chicago, then that could be problematic in that it's a distraction. I won't go as far to say that it's a physical and
Hmm.
unsafe situation, but just a distraction. I think these parties, the conventions, are supposed to be week-long commercials for the
Right.
parties,
Right.
and they want to do everything in their power to put their best foot forward and get voters to jump on board as we get closer to November.
Last thing for you. Who do you have as the leader in the clubhouse right now as we sit here on May 15th to be Trump's VP?
I'm going with Senator Tim Scott.
Okay.
It does appear that Governor Burgum of North Dakota is gaining some steam. So I wouldn't be surprised. I have knocked Christy Nome down a few pegs on the
It's
list.
probably wise. Probably
I know
wise.
there's some stuff out there
There's a
that
couple things. Yeah.
but I'm going with Senator Scott. So
All right. Well, make sure you're reading everything that Nathan is writing about at Inside Elections, because he's covering these elections as well as everything happening in the Senate and the House. We didn't get a chance to talk about that kind of stuff. We'll have Nathan on another time to talk about how Congress is looking here over these next few months with the November election 6 months away. Nathan, thank you for joining me here on the DC Debrief. Really appreciate it.
no problem. We'll see you next time.